On this episode of Random Paint Jobs. Greetings all, Morgan with High Tide Games in beautiful Powell River, British Columbia, Canada. For this episode, I'm going to test and stress myself by trying to paint this bunch of chibi ninjas to the highest quality I can in very short periods of time. The models are from the Clan Ika box for Ninja All-Stars, produced by Ninja Division. For the keen-eyed of you, you'll notice that this is a French edition expansion. As a retail store, High Tide Games gets access to distributor clearance and liquidation products, including non-English overstock. Usually these are board games, but occasionally miniature-based games crop up and I try to grab especially good deals for painting projects. The language component is irrelevant when used for this purpose since I have no intention of playing the associated games. I also have the Clan Tora box, but I'm sticking with Clan Ika because Ika has some octopi sculptural details that I want to paint. The box comes with more models than we'll need. For our challenge, we only need 8, specifically 2 copies each of 4 different sculpts. Of those available, I decided on the following: a classical looking ninja, a wizard dude with an octopus on his head, a female ninja with a big old shuriken, and a massive oni with an octopus face. The challenge is this: I'm going to take our classy little ninja, paint it in 1 hour. I'll go away for a few hours, take a break, come back, and we'll paint the same sculpt in half an hour. Following day, I'll paint the ninja lady in an hour, then go away for a few hours, come back, paint her up again in a half-hour time frame. Day after that, where I'll do the wizard, and then on the 4th day, I will paint the ninja oni. For the octopus oni, I'm going to up the difficulty level just a little bit, and I'm going to try to incorporate the color schemes of all 3 of the ninjas, the first 3 sculpts we do, into that final one, because, this isn't going to be tricky enough as it is. I also want to see if there's any progression from the first model through to the 4th, whether the overall executions improve in quality as I get used to the time constraints. Before we start, I'll give everyone a quick cleaning and a standard black and white zenithal priming to pick out details, then it's on to the first sculpt. A few last minute details, a quick test of the stopwatch, pull out the brushes, check that I have water, show off the palette, give a final once-over of the model to plan out my scheme, and lastly, stress myself out and hesitate a bit more before starting the clock. Let's, yeah. And start. First thing I painted was the cloak in a blue-green, just slathering it all on, trying to cover everything. While that dried, I started on the blue headband and mask and quickly realized that I could do a bunch of wet blending. Adding black for the recesses and white for the highlights, his slacks and shirt are also hit with blue. I apologize for not painting in frame all the time. It's quite the challenge to keep an eye on the model, the clock, and the camera when painting quickly. The camera also tends to migrate a bit because my current setup is awesome. Lots of miserable wet blending on the hood. I don't have much experience with the technique, so I figured that now is a good time to try it out since I didn't have time to fret over making it look, good. At the 10-minute mark, I was still working on the greens and blues and was keenly aware of that fact. However, as the sculpt didn't have a huge diversity of textures, I figured I could spend a fair amount of time on those colors. For his accent and belt, I brought in a solid medium green for a base coat. A slash of muddy skin tone on the face, and we're at the 1/4 mark, or what would be the halfway mark for the half-hour paint job. Black for the sword and some really rough gray highlights. Hands, then back to the face. The lovely part about chibi-styled miniatures is how easily the eyes are to paint because they're just, huge. With the halfway point quickly approaching, I started on the yellow highlights, forcing myself to move even faster. At 30 minutes, I paused, took stock of where I was, and pushed on. I was no longer thinking about what I could accomplish in a half hour. I slowed down and worked on refining details. I also started on the base, being one who believes that a model isn't complete unless it has some sort of painted base. It doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't need flocking or anything, but it does need at least a bit of paint. We're going to fast forward the rest of this. It's all highlights, washes of strong tone for the clothing, and flesh wash for the skin. I'll definitely need to wash everything sooner for the next model as it'll require time to dry. I was pretty stoked at this stage. The model didn't look like crap and the base was coming out very nicely. Dirt, floorboards, stones, and still a whole 10 minutes left. The last thing I did was try to fix the hood's wet blending. That's an hour. Not bad at all. With that, I pulled a short shift at high tide, came home, and sat back down for the challenge's second half. I gave the original model a quick look over to recall what colors went where and then put it out of sight. Clean brushes, new water, a mental rehearsal, and it's go time. Immediately I jumped into wet blending all the blue-green, then all the blue. There's just no time for futzing around, just paint and go. At 15 minutes, most of the base coats were down. Washes, bam! Black for the base, bam! Relocate the stopwatch, bam! The last few minutes is all edge highlights followed by some base work. Done. And you know what? It still doesn't look like crap, considering the amount of time that was spent on it. Not as good as the other one, but still, half the time. On to the next day and a new model. So this little lady was a real pain in the butt to paint. She was considerably more busy than the previous one. Hair, hairbands, headband, scarf, 2 swords, giant shuriken, exposed skin everywhere, bracers on the hands. A minute to go for the half-hour mark and I was only just washing the model. I was certainly not pleased where I was when 30 minutes hit. The last 20 minutes though were fairly pleasant. I slowed down, worked on highlights, and remembered to breathe. Extreme white edges cover a world of gross. Done. And the only thing I forgot to highlight was her face. Also, she looks sort of zombie-like. That's fine. No time for tears. Let's go to work, come back, and do it all over again. And go! Now knowing how complex the model was, and how much time I wanted at the end to work on extreme highlights, I just slapped the brush around and managed to start on washes around the 15-minute mark. As it dried, I slathered the base down, then worked on highlighting black as it wasn't hit with wash. Pretty sure I stopped breathing during the last 3 minutes. No highlights on the hair, no white edges, and I hadn't painted the eyes. I'll let my reaction when the clock hit 30 minutes speak for itself.
Oh, that's so bad.
Time for some sleep, then more self-flagellation. I was unreasonably excited about this model, and solely because of the octopus on this guy's head. I had a solid idea of what I wanted to do and was planning on using it as a test for the next sculpt. Let's fast forward through these boring bits and focus on the good ones. I wish I had more time to work on the reeds. I painted with the half-hour time frame in mind, and with only a few minutes left in that time frame, the reeds weren't where they should have been. They and the octopus were the model's primary features, and I wanted them as crispy as possible. The face is, well, it's pretty bad. Octopus time! I have to say, the black line effect was wonderful. For the eyes, I went with a little W-shaped pupils, which some octopi have. I didn't want to do like just a little dot or a line. I figured I'll have to go with W's. And we're done. Other than the silly looking face, it's still not terrible. Not terrible, but also not complete, as I forgot to paint the base. Let's see what all 3 one-hour paint jobs look like side by side. I was wonderfully pleased and impressed with what I'd pulled off so far. They're all looking pretty solid for 1-hour paint jobs. Well, you know what comes next. Let's paint that wizard again, and in half the time. As I didn't allow myself time for the second paint job during the same day as the first, I was forced to paint 3 models in 1 day to keep on schedule. There really isn't much to say here. I cut out some middle steps to make sure I had time to paint all the reeds and apply something to the base. Just paint and go. And how do I think I did?
Failure, Morgan. Well, at least I got some of his base done, I guess.
Well, no time to lose. Quick shower and shave, and then onto the giant octopus-faced Oni. I'll let Past Morgan explain his plan.
And we're going to use all the colors and techniques that we learned and used in these previous ones. Technique-wise, the biggest thing is going to be to use a big flat brush for these big areas, and I have an even larger one now. So we really should be able to get this all done in about 10 minutes for our base coat. I know I said that before, but wham, 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 done. Wham, 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 done, right? I mean, it's fairly fast. If we can get this all painted base coat in 10 minutes, and then our wash will be sitting high.
10 minutes for base coats. Let's see how things actually panned out. And start. There's me flying past 10 minutes and still base coating. My water quickly became too gross to use, so I had to replace it, which cost me precious seconds. I would remedy this in the half-hour paint job by having 2 water pots available instead of just 1. The purple went down nice and smoothly. The reddish armor highlights did not. 30 minutes and the first highlights aren't finished. I certainly felt the pressure and was sort of flailing around with my brush, or so it seemed to me at the time. With only 4 minutes left, I still had all the white highlights and the eyes to finish. No sweat. My thoughts on what I finished with?
I really like the face. Face is quite nice. I like that the sharp jump in colors. Everything else is meh. It's really the pink and the purple that do it. Everything else, there's not enough time. There's just not enough time. Another minute or so, if I hadn't wasted it early on those those issues, maybe could have gotten a bit more white on there. Like I missed all back here. This is just not a finished model. Okay.
How are you going to crush this model, Past Morgan?
What we're gonna do is a 3-stage process. We're going to hit everything with pure color. So nothing toned down with grays, no mixes. I'm not going to do the base in purple for the face. Pure color. Wash. White gray highlights. That's it. If I have time, I'll finish off the base. So while the wash dries, I'll hit the base as quickly as I can. But all we're going to just go is straight color. We're not going to thin it down anything. We're just going to splorch it on. Get good coverage, and then we're going to just highlight white, or wash, highlight, and white, because we don't have time. Yeah.
Let's splorch some paint. Go! Even at this speed, I couldn't get all the base colors down in 10 minutes. We did have everything washed in 15 though, so go me, I guess. The wash is still soaking wet when I start on the highlights, which I'm hammering out with a big old flat brush because I just don't have the time to switch to something smaller. I scarcely thought about what I was doing with the final highlights. Every big edge I registered got hit with white, and the hammer got slathered in it. And then I went and butchered his front armor in the literal last second. That's it. Let's look at some final side-by-sides.
I really enjoyed this painting challenge. The only part that I didn't enjoy was the final product for the 1 hour Oni paint job. I hadn't anticipated just how much surface area I would have to paint. I didn't properly assess the amount of detail that was really there, especially for those final highlights. That red armor that he's got, all those edges needed to get done if you want it to look pretty good. Other than that, I was really happy. I'm fairly proud of these final models. On some of these, well, actually on about half of these ninjas, exactly half of these had an hour on it, and I spent 7 hours roughly on the Birdman from the first video. I have to say that I am far more pleased with the final result for these ninjas than for the Birdman. The parts of the Birdman I like. Some of the ninja faces are really bad. Faces are hard to do in a short period of time. But overall, I think they come across as better products, especially when you consider 1 hour versus 7 hours. Yeah, I highly recommend doing this challenge for viewers out there, especially if you are like me and you are coming back to the hobby after a long absence. If you are not feeling confident and you're just like, I'm spending way too much time, sit down and do it in an hour. Right? Take two sculpts, two models, same sculpt. Try to paint one in an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then try to do the same sculpt in half the time. And time yourself. Put a stop clock in front of you, start and stop, and then just try doing it over again in half the time. It is quite a bit of fun, and you'll be surprised at how not crappy your finished product may turn out. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to look good, but it probably is not going to look as bad as you think it's going to look. Yeah, so I recommend going and trying. So you don't have to do the same sort of marathon that I did, where it was 4 models over 4 days, twice, and then try to incorporate all the colors from the first 3 into the last one. That's a bit much, but I definitely recommend it. So you'll be happy to know that I do have a 4K webcam now, so moving forward, the videos should be nice and crispy. We're not going to upload in 4K. It'll still be 1080 or whatever it is we're doing for this one. But because we're going to be filming in 4K, I'll be able to keep the camera a little bit farther back. We'll be able to zoom in and won't lose a whole lot of quality. I also have a boom arm coming in, so you won't have this wandering eye effect while I'm painting, which will be really helpful for accelerated time things like this for this video. I'm sorry if you got a little bit motion sick watching it, but as you saw from that picture, my setup's not great for time-lapse photography right now. So I'm hoping that clears itself out once that boom arm comes in. For future videos, as of the time of filming this clip, I've already started on the next 2 projects. We're still looking at about a 1-month delay between releases, so that we have enough time. The next 2 projects are fairly involved, so I'm doing them simultaneously to just give myself enough time, give Kelsey enough time to edit things. One last thing, as you may have noticed, we're no longer in my house. We're at High Tide Games in the office. Moving forward, I'm going to be doing all of my headshots here. It'll give you a bit nicer background to look at. We've got some of our board game products here, a few magic cards, some bulk overstock. So that's it. Well, see you guys later.
Visiting British Columbia? Stop by High Tide Games and say hello. We're only 4 hours and 2 ferry rides north of Vancouver.